Hello, and welcome to Higher Voltage, a podcast about higher education that explores what's working, what's not, and what needs to change in higher ed marketing and administration. I'm your host, Kevin Tyler. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Higher Voltage. Today is our very first repeat guest. He's a buddy of mine. We have worked together at places like UCLA and other higher education initiatives. He's a wonderfully, powerfully brained human being who's doing some really great work in the higher ed landscape. And my husband and I, are the lucky beneficiaries of his very generous holiday Kanahoma box, of which the coffee mug I haven't been able to use because my husband has taken it. So it's good. He would be very pleased to know that he loves your coffee mugs from Kanahoma. Seth Odell is here to join us today. Seth is one of higher education's leading voices in enrollment marketing with nearly 20 years of experience at institutions including Southern New Hampshire University, National University System, and UCLA, as I mentioned earlier. He is the founder and CEO of Kanahoma, one of the fastest growing marketing agencies in higher education, where he partners with colleges and universities nationwide to drive enrollment growth. An Emmy award-winning marketer, Seth has been recognized for his innovative brand strategies and his expertise in helping institutions navigate growth, mergers, and acquisitions in the rapidly evolving education landscape. Seth, I am so excited to have you back on Higher Voltage for this conversation.
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for having me on. And what an honor to be the first repeat guest. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
First. Yeah, man.
I love it.
Part of the faculty.
Well, I'm going to try to live up to the expectations that come with such an invitation.
Well, I appreciate that. We have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have you here. The reason why you're here today is because I recently attended a webinar about the future of search that you hosted. And when I tell you that it was one of the richest, most substantive kinds of demonstrations of expertise and really incredible, deeply researched information, plus your perspective is always so thoughtful and intentional. I wanted to have this conversation for an extended audience because I imagine not everyone who needs to hear what you were saying on that webinar was in attendance. And so I want to help amplify some of the points you made around the future of search and what institutions can do to prepare for how students are searching, but also how the marketing function kind of functions on campus. And so to set the table for this conversation, obviously AI is on the front of everyone's mind in higher education and of course outside of higher education, and search tools are changing how people find information and cutting into traditional search traffic. SEO strategies are being somewhat upended. Click-throughs are down, search traffic is down. You cover all of these kinds of metrics that we typically look at in higher education, and things are changing. And the things that are changing are causing folks to scramble and adjust to this new world of AEO. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the information that you shared on your webinar, just give me the lay of the land here in like early 2026 about the size of the challenge that these shifts are making for higher education.
Be happy to. I love this conversation and this topic. So the first thing is that when we talk about search, like obviously online internet search, that is where the majority of engagement with college and universities starts as far as what we're able to track. 85% of folks are starting online searching for an institution. And we can have a conversation later in the podcast about the things that happen even before that. But the reality is search is the front door for our industry, for discovery, for finding your institution, finding what you're looking for, whether you're a grad student trying to find a program or an undergrad student trying to find the right fit for where you want to go for residential experience. That search environment, and by and large, when I say search, I often refer to really Google, is changing a lot. So there's a rise in what's called zero-click, which has been around, for a while, but 60% of Google searches now end without a click. And the reason is, for anybody listening, when you do a search, you get that AI answer box that pops up, and Google is trying to give you the answer to the information you're looking for without even having to click off to another website. Now, keep in mind they do that because they want you to prompt another search that lets them drive another ad and get more impressions. But like AI answer boxes are changing a lot. 60% of searches now result in no click at all, which means the traffic never makes it to us in the first place. At the same time, we have a rise in like LLMs, large language models, by and large ChatGPT, but Claude and many others. And so folks, about 15 to 20% of the market is starting their searches on AI platforms. I'm one of those. I often refer to ChatGPT first before Google. And about 50% of folks in the US are saying that they're using it in some capacity in search. So they're actually like bouncing back and forth. So we got like 15% of the market that's now disappeared from Google, 60% of the folks on Google that are getting the information they're looking for without a click. And at the same time, the third trend that Google doesn't tout as publicly is that overall search for higher ed is actually down as well. And so in the fall, we saw over 10% declines in grad-specific searches, undergrad-specific searches, just overall industry impressions. There's less demand. So we talk a lot about the demographic cliff for traditional undergraduate higher ed, like less students graduating high school. There's also just less people searching for things related to higher education on Google in the first place. So when you have this rise of zero click, this rise of folks leaving traditional search engines for LLMs, and you have less people searching overall, what it means is declining organic traffic, which is what a lot of institutions are seeing. And a lot of our industry, especially at the adult and online side, is built on paid search ads. Paid search ads are almost always the largest investment for most adult online institutions, grad programs in particular. And so this has been like the bread and butter pipeline for prospective students from a marketing perspective to get in front of people. And I don't want to say it's drying up. I do not believe the platform is on fire. But as I shared the webinar, it is melting. And we should be aware that search changing is probably the biggest impact we're going to have in recruitment since the introduction of really web and then into social media. So if you blended those two trends from late 90s into the early mid aughts to maybe 2010 when social really boomed, we're going through another era like that. And I think the impact will be larger. And so it's easy to look at it in isolation. I see folks have a conversation about, rise of zero click. It's easy to talk about rise of ChatGPT. But when you combine what's really happening, which is that search is fundamentally changing, I think you realize that this is a bigger shift than a lot of people realize, and it's going to disrupt the way we market and recruit, and it's going to have to reflect the way we resource and structure ourselves if we're going to navigate it effectively.
So I love that. I love that there are two components really to this conversation. I feel like a lot of times in marketing conversations, specifically in higher education, we kind of talk about the ingredients instead of talking about the meal. And I think that there were some really interesting analogies that you kind of surfaced in the conversation in the webinar around this is not only about what we are doing, but also the structures in which, like you just referred to, the structures of marketing and higher education as an idea, as a philosophy, as a function. Can you speak to what this means from a leadership level? What should folks be thinking about at the leadership level to kind of respond to these shifts?
There is a lot. So one of the first things from a leadership level is that our primary recruitment channels are going to remain under pressure and they're going to become less efficient. So how does a leader react to a challenge? You're probably going to get two key things from your marketing team. One is that organic traffic is down to the website. And that's going to freak people out. And you need to understand it's not that your team necessarily did anything wrong. It's that a percentage of the traffic you used to get is now getting all the information they need from a search engine or an LLM without having to come to your website in the first place. And so traffic is going to go down. So how are you going to react to that? And that's one piece. Second thing is you're going to get told at the same time that your paid channels like Google and specifically paid search are now producing either less leads and or they're more expensive to acquire. And so you're going to find that your paid channels are less efficient at the same time that you need them to offset organic. A lot of leaders, I think, react to that by demanding change and improved performance rather than being aware of the macro trends. I think the folks that navigate this successfully will not just sort of whack-a-mole the end result or the output, which is, hey, how come cost per inquiry has gone up on this report? But instead say, what are we doing to look at our media mix, our investment strategy, and ask some tough questions? Just one of those tough questions is the fact that in almost every case, I don't think I've ever engaged with a college or university in my career that I think invests enough in SEO, like search engine optimization. It is at best 5, maybe 10% of a marketing budget. And yet organic is the primary driver of all enrollments. It's very, very rare that I've ever found an institution where when you actually look at starts, the primary source is paid. And so we are just dramatically and grossly underinvested in SEO exactly at a time when search is changing. People got to have a conversation about that. The way we're structured may be different. The way we resource may need to look different. And so I think the biggest thing is leaders need to know what's coming. If I could speak to every president and CMO, I would say your organic traffic will likely decline and your paid efficiency will likely get worse. Be aware of that now before it shows up in next month's marketing report and start to have those conversations. You don't need to wait to get the end result of that. And depending on people's recruitment cycles, there's some folks that I honestly think aren't going to be aware of how much search has changed until next fall. Like they're going to end up being soft on their fall target next year and say what happened. And it's like, it already has happened. Like it's already in your pipeline. Hopefully you're aware of what's going on and you're tracking this. So see what's really happening at a higher, like more elevated level, and see it as soon as you possibly can. That'd definitely be my advice for leaders.
100%. And I think it's worth noting that this does not mean this conversation we're having, especially around search in the performance of a website, does not mean that your website is less important, right? It means actually the opposite, right?
100%. So one of the things that most folks are seeing is a decline in organic traffic and an increase in conversion rate, which means of the folks that do make it to your website, more of them are taking the action you want, whether it's to fill out an RFI, like a request for information form, or to start an application. The traffic that is coming to your website as a result of the shifts in search is higher intent. And that like makes sense logically, right? It's like, well, if they could have gotten the information from an answer box or from a chat GPT, then they wouldn't have bothered to your site. So folks are only making it to your site once they've done that like surface level fact-finding search behavior. And now it's deeper and they're much higher intent. They're like, okay, I'm really ready to understand the nuances here. I want to learn more about you. I want to know how this is going to work if I attend your institution. And so it is more important than ever because the traffic is higher quality. The second thing I would note is it's also more important than ever just because like one of the ways that you offset a problem in your marketing funnel is by solving it in another place, not where the problem exists. So a lot of folks are going to see that organic traffic is down and they're going to see that paid is inefficient. And they're going to ask their teams, how do we increase organic traffic and how do we make paid more efficient? Those are good questions to ask. But the other more important question to ask, in my opinion, if you want to make your fall, is to say, because we are seeing less organic traffic and because we are less efficient in paid, we now are projecting that we're going to come in, let's say 10% down in our starts. How can we navigate and replace that 10% so we still hit our target? One of those ways is by improving the conversion of your website. You already have traffic coming every single day, and so few higher ed websites are really built for conversion rate optimization and really focused on helping a student navigate the journey of finding their program, gathering information, taking an action that's requested. And so it's a huge opportunity to use CRO lower funnel to offset a gap and a miss upper funnel. And so a lot of times people will, again, they'll try to fix the problem where it exists, which you should do. But the real way to make up for the gap is by finding it in other places. So can you improve your application start to application submit? Can you improve your admitted to enrolled rate? Those will take different behaviors and changes to do that. But that's how you actually kind of collectively offset what we're seeing as a real kind of softening of the upper funnel.
Yeah, I appreciate you surfacing the CRO conversation because that was one of the points that you raised as well in the webinar. And the things that are being measured, or the way performance is being measured, is also changing. Obviously, right? As the inputs change, obviously the outputs do as well. And so, what is the new currency in terms of measurement when it comes to these shifts around search?
Yeah. So there is no good answer to that. I was just having a text exchange with two CMOs yesterday, and one of them was literally texting me saying, like, is direct attribution really still the best way to go? Is there really nothing else we can do? And I have a contrarian opinion, which is that like true attribution doesn't exist. And there's a lot of people out there that are going to sell you vaporware that says they can solve it. And there are solutions to increase visibility and to better see what's going on. But like attribution is so blurred with what's going on. People are searching in Google. They're searching back over to an LLM. They're going directly to your website. They're doing some of that behavior on a phone, on a home Wi-Fi network, some of it on a work laptop at an office. Like it is impossible to truly know what's going on. And so I always tell people the best thing you can do is first and foremost focus on business, on understanding and performance. So move as high level, 60,000 feet as possible. What's our marketing budget? What's our total inquiries, total apps, total starts? We can measure that. We can measure volume. Volume in the funnel is perfectly measurable. It is not perfectly attributable. And so focus first on understanding volume and what can influence volume. You want to measure volume, you want to measure rate, you want to measure cost and velocity. Those are the only four things you can ever measure in higher ed. You can slice and dice it a million ways. I guess my advice is like, don't chase attribution assuming that perfect attribution exists. Like even in this conversation I had yesterday, I said like one of the things I love from a attribution perspective is like, if you want to measure your media mix, which means like how much should I spend in Google versus paid search or versus like SEO versus awareness marketing. I still believe in old school geo holdout models, which means if you run one media mix in one DMA, like one city, and another media mix in another, and then you track what's happening both with paid and organic, and you know the variable difference between the two is that your shifts in investment strategy, you can directionally see what's going on. And I learned that one way back at Southern New Hampshire. I worked with a great head of data who told me where there's smoke, there's fire. And he said, like, if you want to be a good marketer, look for smoke and make changes as soon as you have more information today than you did yesterday. Don't wait till you find fire. Meaning, like, if you know there's smoke, there's fire somewhere in that general vicinity. And he's like, the best thing you can do as a marketer is, like, as soon as you pick up a new sense that something is better or worse, act on that behavior and move forward. And that a lot of times people slow down. We have a couple partners at Kanahoma that invest significantly in like multi-touch and blended attribution modeling. And it's helpful, but like even after we spend tens of thousands of dollars to do this analysis, like none of us have total confidence in it. And it still ends up being a gut check. And so like, what can be measured is that's different and new is you can understand your visibility in these platforms. And I will say that's the best place for people to start. So I don't want to dismiss all measurement, but I would say that like, are you aware of what's happening in organic traffic? Are you aware of your cost changes, your impression volume changes in paid search? Are you aware of how you're appearing in LLM? So like generative engine optimization, GEO. Are you aware of where you're appearing in answer boxes? You cannot get the level of visibility into that you can in like paid search through Google's ad console or through GA4, like with their analytics platform. But there are solutions out there that you can use, that we use, that can tell you roughly how you're appearing in what categories and how well. And so, you do want to establish a directional baseline. And so that's important. But I'd say first, focus on the business metrics that matter most. Second, understand your current state visibility across answer box and LLMs. And then the third is like, don't get caught up chasing perfection, because perfection is not achievable in this market. And even if you measure it this month, there's going to be a change next month that completely, changes everything else anyway. And this space is moving so fast that measurement over time is directionally beneficial, but not actually, something that you can completely build a strategy upon.
So often what you're saying, especially about the visibility piece, calls to mind, at least for me, the kind of default practice of higher education looking to itself for how to structure websites. And we've seen over the last 10 years, like this kind of, whatever the website is, it looks like the other 16 that you're looking at, essentially, right? And so what does visibility look like when you're up against innovation in an industry that is so easily comparable to itself?
There's like a very tactical answer to that, and there's a very broad answer to that. The tactical answer is, I think it's really critical to understand what are the few core reasons why someone does or doesn't choose your institution. So I'm speaking from a place of like a tuition-dependent institution that's trying to drive enrollment. It's very easy to have a complicated brand strategy, but at some point you need to just acknowledge things like, we're a private institution, and that means we're priced higher than the local publics, or we're a private faith-based institution, which means we're probably not going to attract students that aren't interested in, for example, like a Christian education. There's a few core drivers. If institutions do like non-matriculation surveys, understand not just where the students that applied and went elsewhere went, but understand why. I'm a huge believer in non-matriculant, because the truth is, like, there are like 2, 3, 4 core drivers usually in the enrollment experience. And so when it comes to comparison is no longer about the whole institution. It's about understanding that actually we have this amazing scholarship program, a great discount rate, and we're far more affordable than people realize. Okay, we can talk differentiation and positioning and information around that. And we can pressure test that across LLMs, answer box, and search in general to understand, like, if someone is looking to compare, where do we come up? We had an institution that we were doing a scan for on LLMs, and there was like factually incorrect information that claimed that you couldn't transfer a certain amount of credits to them, and you actually could. And so there was like this like wave of misinformation that is out there because LLMs are ranking authority in a very different way. They're giving authority to a lot of third-party sites that maybe shouldn't have it. And so this was a case where one of our partners there was information that if you asked, like, compare these 3 or 4 institutions, you actually get incorrect information. If you will entertain me for a tangent, this is something I did not hit on in the webinar that I would love to share with folks, which is like exactly how do I look at how we position and understand where the LLMs are positively or negatively influencing the perception of that. So what I will do is I'll work with an institution and I'll say, give us your top institutions that people select instead of you. So like if they're thinking about you and 3 or 4 others, who are they? I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll say, I'm a prospective student. I give all sorts of information about that. And I say, I am interested in the following 4 institutions, A, B, C, and D. Can you please build me a table that compares these 4 institutions by the top important value props that you think I should consider, such as location, cost, quality, outcome. And I go through all the things that drive someone's decision. Do you have my program? How much does it cost? How fast can I finish? And then ChatGPT will actually build me a table and compare value props for me. And then it'll source where it gets all its information. And so that's where, when I was doing that for a partner, it uncovered that it said that they're not as transfer friendly. And I'm like, that's not true. You guys have a great transfer policy. We clicked through this. There was a third-party site that was very questionable, that had wrong information. And all of a sudden, prospective students are now being navigated wrong. So we're not in control of how our brand is being assessed and analyzed, because people are outsourcing some of that assessment to technology to do for them. So that's a tactical ground level. I then will take it up to 30, 60,000 feet, which would just say that the reality is brand is more important than ever, and understanding who we actually are is more important than ever. We're an industry of 4,000 institutions, and we all look and sound so similar. And I think the institutions that are going to navigate this effectively are going to be the ones that know exactly who they are, what they stand for, what they offer, and why. And they communicate that consistently everywhere, whether that's through PR, whether that's through their own media and their website, through organic and social. And so I think we're going to see this exposure where people are being pulled right now into tactical recruitment marketing, because that's where the pressure is, because organic traffic's down and paid is less efficient. But the truth is, the solve for that is going way upper funnel and being are we clear on who we are, who we serve, what we offer, and why? I think folks that do that will be successful. And unfortunately, I think a lot of folks are going to miss the reality that there is a call for brand in this moment, but it's not clear if you're not listening.
Ooh, Seth, that was a sermon. Which I mean only in the best ways. I think that, I started working in higher education, I don't know, 2013, 12, 14, I don't know. It's been a while, right? And for some of the biggest issues that the industry has faced over that tenure, the answer has so often been brand, right? It has so often been brand. And so it's been this chorus that has kind of come up in so many different ways. And it almost feels like old hat for that to be the answer, but it still is. And I'm curious if you can just kind of speak to, and this is, just off the top of my head, if you could speak to why that's always the answer, right? Why can't we get to that point, and so we can find the next answer about how we talk about, market, amplify our brands in higher ed?
Yeah. I think it's just, the reality is, no matter how big our marketing budget is, the primary influence from us is brand awareness and affinity, meaning, do people know we're an option, and how do they feel about us? There was a study that came out earlier this week specific to private Christian education that showed 70% of students, before they did their first search, were already aware of the institution and had heard about it from somebody else. There is a whole world from the product perspective where we are picking up on this stuff. And so, whether it's a billboard for a UCLA, or it's hearing about where your friend or neighbor, your colleague is going to school, the reality is this real nuanced, soft referral rate is the actual driver of our industry, even though we so often don't track it. We saw that even at Southern New Hampshire University. When I started in 2011, we were a regional institution. We focused on in-state and then what we called NE6, the neighboring states. And we did this campaign where we went out and did outposts into North Carolina and Oklahoma and Portland, Oregon. And we're can we successfully recruit people there? And we went and did these pilots. And what we realized is, even after we did the paid pilots, we kept getting students from these markets. And the reason is, if you recruit a student in Portland and they have a positive experience, they will tell their friends or family about you. And that will influence. Now, that person in Portland may still search for you and find a Google ad, or they may still see a Facebook ad or a TV ad. But the reality is, we as marketers do not influence nearly as much as we think from recruitment. It's the actual institution and the product and the outcome we do or don't drive. Are we good at what we do? Are we clear on who we are? And do we effectively deliver the outcome people actually want? And it's hard as a college, because colleges are a lot of things. Many of them are their own cities and villages, 50,000 students and staff, some institutions with hundreds of thousands of alumni. These are huge. And so when you have that, you might have a hospital system, other things. It's how do you build a brand that is so many things to so many people? That is really hard. And so what often happens is it becomes the classic, we are a house of brands and not a branded house. And my personal opinion is the answer is we're always both. It's the umbrella brand, and then it's the subsidiary brands that support it. And that's the influence, is like who we actually are. But it's just hard to focus on that because like operationally, the bigger you are, the more things you are, the more stakeholders you have to gather around the table. And that's like really hard work.
Yeah.
And what president wants to take that on when they know they're going to get arrows in the back from somebody, faculty or alumni, or like you can't make everybody happy when you're trying to define exactly who you are, what you do, and why. And so I think a lot of people candidly avoid it. And they avoid it because it's hard work without near-term benefit, but it's like the most important work you can possibly do. And I have seen it done exceptionally well by presidents who have said this is going to be, my key positioning component. And the way that I've navigated it as an agency owner is I try to ask presidents, what's your legacy? What is your legacy going to be? Because you have, if you're lucky, 10 years here. If you're less lucky, maybe 3 to 5, 10 years shortening for presidents. And so like, let's distill your 10 years here and say, what are people going to remember? Unfortunately, historically for our industry, that usually meant what buildings did I buy or build? And so that's why we went on that building boom of the 90s and the aughts of like, let's take on debt and launch something new. The conversation I have with presidents now is more about like really, really bringing clarity to service and who we are and why, and ideally having that result in growth that improves the sustainability of the institution. But that's been my navigation, has been like, what's your legacy as a president? And so, I don't know, that was a long-winded sermon as well, but hit at least a few of the points you asked about.
I think it's important. I think that, some of this is obviously speculation. We both work in the space. And so we also have like case studies to speak to. And it just kind of feels to me that if the answer is always brand, why aren't we carrying and feeding it as more than we have in the past, right? Like, I know that we have this, this sometimes can exist friction between the president and the brand. Sometimes those merge, sometimes they do not merge at all. And like, what's most helpful? But so often the answer is making sure that people know who you are, why you exist, and what you do.
And everything flows from that. When that is clear, everything else starts to make sense. And like everybody knows how to play their part and do their role without asking.
Yeah.
Student deportations, suspended research grants, penalizations for DEI initiatives. And that's just this week. These and a whole raft of other legal questions and challenges are redefining higher education every day. That's where our new podcast, Campus Docket, comes in. I'm Scott Schneider, an attorney and adjunct professor at the University of Texas School of Law. And in every episode of Campus Docket, I'll be joined by Eric Kelderman, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education, to break down the latest legal issues that higher ed leaders need to know about, from slash funding to rules regarding NIL and student athletics and everything in between. Tune into Campus Docket, part of the Volt Podcast Network, as we help you navigate higher ed's thorny legal issues.
So obviously it's no secret to either of us and really anyone else listening to our conversation that, marketers are, at ground zero of so many of the shifts happening in higher education, right? What happens to the industry gets reflected in the duties and responsibilities that marketers on the ground have to respond to. And so this is yet another, like this future of search and how marketing teams are structured is yet another shift. And so I'm curious if there's like a bit of good news here, some opportunities that have presented themselves in this new way that search is happening that you can kind of just share and lift up the spirits of folks who might going through.
I have a couple thoughts on that. First, I will speak to if you are earlier or mid in your career, so you are not an executive, this is your opportunity to absolutely become the in-house expert and become the linchpin. If you ever read like Seth Godin's Linchpin book, the reason is that the solution is not going to come from specialists. It's going to come from generalists. Typically at an organization, you start as a specialist, like I do SEO, or I do paid, or I do design, or I do copy. And as you move up in your career, you become a generalist. Like I'm now the VP of marketing. I'm over everything. For the most part, the generalist leadership in our industry are not going to successfully solve this. I do not believe they have their collective finger on the pulse enough, and I think there is this uncertainty. And so there is an opportunity for folks that are maybe mid-level in their career to become obsessive about all the solutions that live across channel, because this isn't a paid search thing or an SEO thing or a website thing. And I just harken back to like my own career. I joined UCLA the first go around in 2007. Right as social media was just becoming a thing, I set up the institution's YouTube channel and Twitter account, MySpace, although I don't always tout that one as proudly. And like the reality is there was no one there to solve that. And when I left UCLA in 2011, there was a team of like 5 or 6 people that were doing the things that I alone was doing as an entry-level employee in 2007. I filled the gap. I stepped in when it was blurred and like, what should we do with video and how should we solve for social? And so for me, it was like massive career growth. So if you are looking for career growth, this is your chance to not be seen as a web content specialist, or just a copywriter, because the solution is going to come from collaboration and you can just blur the lines and play across all of them. So for those folks, that's the biggest piece of advice that I would say. Now, for the executive leaders that I do think that are generalists that are in a position of influence to solve some of these things, I will tell you the anecdote my father told me, which was that we were hiking in the Appalachia Mountains, and we came across a bear, and we were with a group of people. And my dad leaned down. And he said, "Are you ready to run?" And I was like, "Dad, you can't outrun a bear." And he's like, "We just have to outrun the slowest person." And my father's a little savage. And that was a hilarious moment. But the advice I give to people is you only have to outrun your competition. So the pressure at night, don't stay up all night and lose sleep saying how do I solve the future of search? How do I stay ahead of AI's influence in marketing? That is a path to no sleep and freaking out because none of us know. And anyone who sells you the solution like they know is just trying to get your money. But you can look at your competitors and you can start to measure things like how are we showing up in answer box and LLMs and how's our organic traffic doing? How's our conversion rate? And you can look at yourself against your peers. And so long as you're better than your peers, you will be fine. There is a window open right now for folks that figure this out. You do not need to be first. You just definitely don't want to be last. And so to me, that's even what I tell myself as an agency owner, we're working right now to try and evolve our paid search product to merge with our SEO product. Why do I have an SEO team and a paid team when they're both designed to service products to the same audience, which is someone searching? My own business structure doesn't reflect the needs of today's market. I just tell myself, okay, when I'm up against other agencies, are they solving this too? Have they already implemented that solution? And as long as I can get to that place faster than them, I'll be fine. But I acknowledge that even in my own business structure, I am not positioned correctly to capture the opportunity. And it would really keep me up at night to think I have to solve that tomorrow. I don't have to solve it tomorrow, but I do need to be outpacing my peers. And that is a very reasonable and healthy benchmark to set for yourself that I think makes improvement a little more achievable.
I'm having so much fun.
Me too. It's so good to see you. I love this stuff.
Yeah, same. And the way that you speak about it is both obviously well informed, but also very easy to understand. And I think that's a really hard needle to thread. And so I appreciate that the piece from folks in the middle of career, what their opportunities look like. That makes really good sense because some of that can feel kind of obscure for some at times in their careers. Listen, the next question is one I ask to everybody who comes through the doors of higher voltage. And it is, what do you think higher education is going to look like in 5 or 10 years? And I can't wait to hear what you're about to say.
Okay. I'm going to take it at 10 plus years because I think it's easier to see on a long enough timeline. It's very hard to see in the near term or midterm, I guess I would say. So, today we have over 4,000 tuition granting college or Title IV institutions in the U.S. Today we have over 4,000 colleges. In 10-ish years, that number will be max 2,500. We are going to see closures of colleges. They will disproportionately be private institutions and private faith-based. Private Christian institutions make up 15% of the market, but 50% of the closures. The trend that's happening in the tip of the spear is on people that are exposed to increasing price pressure. So we're going to see increasing price pressure that will continue to mount. And that will happen. At the same time, we are going to continue to see declining demand. So not only is there a demographic cliff and less students graduating high school, but for those that are graduating, they're increasingly questioning and challenging the value of the degree. Employers are requiring the degree at a dramatically lower rate. 50% of employers last year reduced their degree requirements. Everybody's pushing to decouple the degree, but nobody actually takes a course into a certificate into a degree. It's it doesn't really work, even though everybody claims they want it. The market will say they want hybrid, but they don't, and they won't enroll in it. They want to go fully online. We will see a boon in growth in 100% online programs for 18 to 23-year-olds, and we'll find a segment of high school students that are going to immediately path into online institutions rather than traditional residential. We are going to see a lot of shifts in the K-12 pipeline. There is a massive movement that I'm calling the opt-out movement of public K-12 education. The trend is not as clear because folks are looking at where they're going. They're looking at a growth in homeschooling, or they're looking at a growth in online high school. But when you look at everything, if you look at charter and voucher and homeschool, like what's going to happen is a total siphoning of students out of public K-12 schools. I would argue more than 25% may disappear in the next 10 years. The question that's unknown is, where do those students go to college if they go? At the same time, we're going to continue to see a rise in the trades and a renaissance for folks that are looking for clearer, like anti-AI pathways to good six-figure jobs. And one of those is absolutely, like, the trades is a huge opportunity for folks. We're going to see a huge rise in apprenticeship programs. The government has something like $1 billion of unspent funds they allocated to apprenticeship programs, and not enough institutions are setting them up. We're going to see AI completely disrupt the workforce and a total wipeout, actually starting, I think, with white collar and then moving its way down, not starting at the bottom and working its way up. And so we're going to see rise in unemployment. The question that's unknown is, does that rise in unemployment realize a rise in enrollment? Historically, that has been the case.
Right.
And people get out of work and they go back to school to tool up. I think we're going to see a rise in segment-specific institutions. There is not an opportunity to build another SNU or an ASU or WGU, in my opinion. And what there is an opportunity, though, is to build the SNU specifically for entry-level healthcare jobs, like, very tailored niche institutions, like niching down. There's a saying, niches get riches. And like, that is going to be the future for folks that are successful, is they don't try to be all things to all people. That era has closed. And at the same time, with all of that, higher ed's going to mostly be fine. It's largely ingrained. The folks that are good are going to continue to grow. We will see, continued growth in Publix and in big sports and in the tailgate culture weekend demand, which is one of the reasons like Southern big sports schools are growing right now. But I don't think we're going to see total disruption, with one exception. Right now, higher education has a monopoly on assessment. People are coming because they need the degree to be able to apply for the job and to be able to grow. It is more sometimes for assessment than it is for actual skill. Skill, in many ways, has been democratized. You can go online and learn almost anything at your own pace, whether it's through formalized, like MOOC-like courses, or just through YouTube creators and free accessible content, or using ChatGPT. And you may not even need to learn all those skills anymore if AI provides it to you at your fingertips, or your agent can do it for you. And so the reality is, like, higher ed has lost the monopoly on skill, but we've not lost the monopoly on assessment, which means there is still value in higher ed being able to say, you have been here, and we stamp of approval that you've sat here and been part of this. Now, higher ed measures time more than they actually measure learning objective and outcome, and they don't necessarily measure where you started and where you finished. We're built on the Carnegie measure, so it basically just says, here's how long you were in class. That today has still structurally held. If that collapses, and if assessment is commandeered by AI, and AI can do a better job of assessing someone's ability to be an effective employee than something on a resume that says they went to a college for 4 years, then this industry is in trouble. And then this industry collapses. That today has not happened. But whoever is out there right now building the assessment, the AI-powered assessment of the future, if they are successful, then this industry will absolutely collapse and turn over. If that doesn't happen, then the reality is society still values the college experience, and they value the assessment that comes with the credibility that comes with saying you've been there and you've learned something, and you'll be fine. And in either case, to institutions, I'll say, like, the ones that focus, the ones that know who they serve, why they serve them, and that they are really focused on outcome will be fine. Because the reality is, if students come to you with perceived probability of success and you deliver it because they're better prepared and they are better successful later, then no matter what comes, you will be okay. But there's a lot of institutions out there that have measured time more than outcome. And for them, if assessment doesn't hold, then I do think a lot will change.
Yeah, I think that all makes really good sense. And I think, there's a lot of great nuggets in what you've just said. And I appreciate quite significantly the point around K-12. And I think, I agree with all the points you made there. I also think that, there are these cities, Columbus being one of them, and Indianapolis, I believe, has one, Boston, these career-connected learning academies that are popping up that kind of bridge the gap between the high school and the desire to go to college, right? And I think that there are opportunities for institutions to get involved in those programs, or initiatives, I should say,
Totally.
because it will calcify the value of college.
So one thing that's been on my notes in my phone to write about, a lot of times I'll write down a topic I want to discuss. Sometimes it's something I know well, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should post about that. And other times it's things I want to research. And one of the ones that's been in my notes for like 2 weeks has been more colleges should own and run K-12 institutions. And it was like, help me understand why our industry has made this decision to only be post-secondary. And there are some that have online high schools, right? Like a Penn Foster is a huge online high school and a college division. But there's not many, and it's not the normal state of affairs. And I do think that like understanding that the job to be done at K-12 and college certainly changes at different levels. But the reality is it's development in the pathway to an improved quality of life. And so I do think folks that solve that better will have more success. We're seeing that one of the only growth areas in higher ed is in dual enrollment. There's states now that mandate it, that every high school graduate is going to leave with some form of college credit. There's huge opportunities for improved pathways between K-12 and college. I don't yet am informed enough to sort of speak to exactly what they are, but it's been on my list of like, I need to lean into that. That hits me as something that is a truth that is not yet defined.
Yeah. I mean, Paul Quinn College in Dallas has a K-12 school on their campus. And you can see, I mean, there's all the benefits that you can imagine with having that exposure at that young age. Purdue has their charter school, et cetera. I think that
Marquette has a high school.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, one of the things I think about in terms of, speaking to the ideas rolling through your head is that, I think about the ways in which we are expecting folks who come out folks who are in the middle of their high school experience. We have never had to market any other level of education to any of these people before. You go to the school you're told to go to, and then all of a sudden when you're in 9th, 10th grade, you start getting all these things, and we have not kind of softened the ground to like what to expect, how to assess the places that we are going to further to enrich our futures, right? And there's not only the learning of like what this function or this machine is about, the higher ed marketing piece, but you don't get any exposure to it before it's already time to make the decision. And so I think that if colleges are reaching back further into the K-12 educational experience, we can, again, soften that ground for the kind of messages that we hope to land softly in.
Yeah. And I would just say on this point, like one of the reasons I think this question is so important, even to today's topic, is like, it is so easy to look at the shifts that are happening in search and say like, oh no, we need to change something about the way we market with paid ads. Or like, oh, well, it's bigger than that. It's actually paid and it's SEO. Oh, got it. Okay. Well, actually, you're going to offset the declines in volume by improving your website and conversion lower funnel. Oh, so this is more cross-channel marketing and multi-status stage. Well, actually, yes, but it's really being influenced by brand and PR. So it's actually moving up. And it's like all of this, like, the picture becomes clearer the further out you go. And like, I feel like that is one of the most important jobs that I have when I speak to people, is to like grab them from the weeds and pull them out and say like, it's like you're looking at a pixel and I'm trying to show you a picture. Yes. Step back and it will make sense. And so like, there's a reason why we're talking about the future of search. And then we're talking about the relationship between K-12 and college, because like what is happening here is so much bigger than search. And like, answer boxes and LLMs will not have as big of an impact on the future of college as what's happening broader at a more macro view. So don't think like this is the thing. This is just one of many that you need to be aware of and consider when you think about how to navigate it and how to drive growth.
Seth Odell, you buy the whole seat, but you only use the edge. It's always great to hear you like talk about all
You're
this.
The best, man.
I really appreciate you making time for this conversation. You're a good, dear friend. I'm so glad you're doing so well. And I would love to invite you back later, maybe in a year or so, to see what these trends look like after this conversation. Seth Odell, we will have all of the information from his webinar, including his slide deck, which he's been so gracious to share with us. We'll post that on the episode page, as well as any other contact information that is necessary. But I just want to express my sincere gratitude for your time and your expertise today on Higher Voltage.
Oh, Kev, you're so welcome. I love the conversation. I always love seeing you, and any excuse to catch up with you is just great. So I just love chatting with you.
The Mutual Love Society.
That's right.
Thanks,
exactly. All right, continue.
That's it for this week's episode of Higher Voltage. We'll be back soon with a new episode. And until then, you can find us on Twitter at Volt Higher Ed. And you can find me, Kevin Tyler, on Twitter at Kevin C. Tyler 2.